Tonight, your world does not begin gently. There is no soft alarm, no warm stretch in bed. Instead, you are dragged awake by a factory bell that tears through the dark like an angry scream. It's loud, harsh, and personal, as if it knows you're still lying down. Outside, the night refuses to leave. The sun hasn't won yet. Even the street rats are still quiet, tucked away in the shadows. But you don't get that mercy. You force yourself up from a straw mattress that feels more like a punishment than a place to sleep. Your back snaps as you sit up. The air is so cold, your breath hangs in front of your face. You're awake now, whether you like it or not. Breakfast waits for you. Yesterday's bread, hard, heavy, dry enough to hurt. No butter, no jam, no coffee, just food meant to keep you standing. Nothing more. Your teeth hesitate before biting, already tired. Getting dressed is worse. Your clothes are stiff, rough, and scratch at your skin like they were made to hurt. They smell of sweat and old days that never really ended. Stepping outside doesn't help. The air is thick, smoke, coal, wet, fog, all mixed into something that feels heavy in your chest. Somewhere nearby, someone coughs, deep, wet. Then, suddenly, a blur passes you. It's a child, too young to be running anywhere this early, already late for a shift that will last all day. Here, childhood barely exists. The street beneath your feet is slick with filth, a dark layer coating the stones. Your shoes soak it up instantly, thin, weak, cold. You feel the wet creep in. Then the bell rings again, louder, closer. This one feels aimed at you. You start moving faster, not because you want to, but because being late means meeting the foreman, a man known more for shouting than breathing. And this is only the beginning. You haven't even reached the machines yet, haven't breathed the dust, haven't seen the factory swallow another day. It's still morning, and already you miss your bed. The walk to work isn't peaceful. There's no sunrise, no birds, no friendly faces, just fog hanging low like a dirty blanket, the color of old stone. It smells like smoke and sickness. The road isn't really a road, just mud mixed with soot. Every step risks losing a shoe, and losing a shoe means losing warmth, money, dignity. As you move forward, you notice the rats. Big ones, .com ones. They don't run. They watch you pass with dull eyes, almost bored, like they know exactly where you're going. You walk past rows of cramped houses, all the same, packed tight with families and sickness and noise. Washing lines drip endlessly onto the street. Sunlight never seems to reach this place. Children 5 years old, maybe younger, hurry past, carrying tools instead of toys. Their faces are already tired. The sky above grows darker, not from clouds, but from smoke ahead. Thick, black smoke pouring from the factory like a storm that never ends. Tall chimneys cough out endless clouds, turning day into twilight. Your lungs already burn. You cross a narrow bridge and glance down at the river. It isn't water anymore. It's thick, dark, lifeless. Dead fish float on the surface. The smell alone makes you turn away. Falling in would mean death, fast or slow. No one knows. Then the bell rings one last time. Close now, deafening, final. You hurry forward, heart tight, knowing the foreman is waiting. A man made of anger and fear, topped with a worn hat and absolutely no patience. By the time you stumble through the factory gates, your cardboard shoes are thoroughly soaked, your lungs already protesting, your mood plummeting faster than a lead balloon, and your very spirit feels like it's gently seeping out through your ears. And remember, my friend, this was just the commute. You haven't even started your shift yet. After surviving the Victorian commute, a previe having navigated the labyrinthine streets and the pervasive, acrid bite of the urban smog, a feat deserving of, at least a bronze medal for lung capacity, you finally draw close to the monstrous edifice where your youthful aspirations, and perhaps a few vertebrae, are destined for an untimely end. The factory. It looms before you, a brick titan clawing its way from the industrial haze, a monument to a designer who seemingly harbored a deep-seated vendetta against light, fresh air, and anything in cure, and any is preroquith so can within beam of so you a whack of it the puppy up da fuck up you I depend to but you I'm the two you I to you with puppy with good I'm a good with up the gaga would I wolfed I woke enough but well for the favors that be if you had that but where I was down massive, profoundly imposing, it somehow manages to appear both eerily abandoned and yet teeming with unseen, suffocating life, a paradox that chills you to the bone. Before you even catch a glimpse of the building's formidable facade, the sound assaults you. It's a distant, metallic growl that vibrates through the very ground beneath your worn boots. An echoing roar that brings to mind a thunderous storm embroiled in a frantic skirmish with an entire drawer full of angry kitchen utensils. A relentless, cacophonous symphony of clanks, bangs, and deep, resonant whirs fills the air, punctuated by the piercing shriek of a steam pipe, a sound so strained it suggests the machinery itself is teetering on the edge of an emotional breakdown. Honestly, you can practically feel your eardrums attempting to stage a desperate, futile escape from your skull. The factory's main entrance is guarded by doors that aren't merely heavy. They are colossal slabs of dark iron, the sort of grim portals one might expect to find barring the way to a medieval dungeon or, perhaps, a maximum security penitentiary. You instinctively recoil, a strange, prickling unease washing over you, as if the cold metal radiates the unsettling memory of countless terrible things it has witnessed, things that, you suspect, very much involved fingers. Pushing them open, the sheer force required is a jolt to your whole body, and the instant you step inside, you're enveloped by a palpable, almost physical wall of oppressive heat, intensified noise, and grime so thick it feels as though it has its own distinct, unpleasant personality. The vast interior is plunged into a perpetual twilight, struggling for illumination from small, begrimed windows, each pane a mosaic of cracks and filth, rendering them utterly useless. A tangible haze of dust hangs heavy in the air, a silent, ubiquitous tenant, obscuring the figures of the workers who drift through it like specters, haunted by overdue union dues. The floor, a treacherous landscape, is a slick, uneven canvas of spilled oil, accumulated dirt, sharp metal shavings, and other unidentifiable substances that, for the sake of your immediate psychological well-being, you wisely choose not to scrutinize too closely. Each hesitant step feels like a precarious gamble, and every gamble, you can almost taste it, screams future personal injury claim, a concept yet to be invented. Your immediate, overwhelming impulse is to whirl around and flee, to sprint away, perhaps even to spontaneously relocate to an entirely different century. But just as the thought flickers, the foreman spots you. This man, a walking embodiment of scowls, relentless stress, and pure Victorian misery, is sculpted from granite and bad moods. His entire job description, it seems, involves glaring at workers until they magically accelerate their pace, a skill at which he is terrifyingly proficient. He fixes you with a stare that bypasses your eyes and goes straight for your soul, a look that articulates even asterisk thinking. Asterisk about going home will unlock new, unprecedented levels of my disappointment. You let your gaze drift, for a mere second, to the monstrous machinery surrounding you, the looms, the worry gears, the slapping belts, the crushing presses, all enormous, deafening, and powered by an unholy combination of steam and pure, unadulterated spite. Each contraption appears poised, just one ill-timed blink away from severing a crucial part of your anatomy, and the shift hasn't even begun. Standing there amidst the swirling smoke to the relentless metallic symphony of impending doom, a profound realization settles deep within you. You do not belong here. Your modern brain, bless its anxious heart, screams, nope. Your lungs, already protesting, rasp, goodbye. And your heart, a tiny, hopeful whisper in the chaos, asks, is it too late to pursue a fulfilling career as a baker instead? It is. Welcome to the factory, the silence seems to echo. On your very first day in a Victorian factory, you might, in a moment of utter naivety, imagine some semblance of structured onboarding. Perhaps a friendly, smiling supervisor, a helpful pamphlet, a demonstration video featuring a cheerful chap in a pristine apron, meticulously explaining safety procedures. Oh, my dear listener, how utterly, charmingly incorrect you would be. This is, after all, the Victorian era. Such luxuries are reserved for, well, frankly, they're not reserved for anyone here. The sum total of your safety orientation boils down to a single shouted dictum. Don't get too close to the spinny bits. Your official training commences when the foreman, with an economy of movement that speaks volumes of his disdain, points a gnarled finger toward a behemoth of a machine, a contraption the size of a small carriage, and barks, right, you operate that. That's it, those 4 words. They are your comprehensive syllabus, your entire handbook, your complete educational framework. You stare at the machine. The machine, an animate beast of iron and steam, stares back, an almost palpable menace radiating from its worry components. And somewhere, deep within the rapidly shrinking confines of your hopeful soul, a tiny, despondent voice whispers, well, it's been a good life. Victorian machinery, you quickly gather, isn't designed with user-friendliness in mind. It certainly isn't labeled, nor is it color-coded for your convenience. And as for a reassuringly prominent emergency stop button, don't be absurd. What stands before you is a monstrous, chaotic tangle of gears, belts, pistons, and steam pipes, all clamoring for attention, hissing, clanking, and occasionally spitting hot droplets of condensation with the petulant aggression of mechanical llamas. Your assigned task is to maintain its smooth operation, a notion that strikes you as wildly optimistic, considering you haven't the faintest idea what half its components actually do. Perhaps, you muse darkly, no one truly does. Just then, a fellow worker shuffles over, an older man whose missing 3 fingers speak more eloquently than any safety manual, and whose general demeanor suggests he's long since mislaid the majority of his enthusiasm for existence. This, it seems, is your mentor. He leans close, his voice a gravelly shout over the din. Don't let your sleeve get caught. Then, without another word, he pivots and vanishes, for frankly, that rather comprehensively covers the entire curriculum. You offer a polite, if bewildered, nod, as if this solitary, rather blunt warning will magically shield you from the 18 other ingenious ways this particular machine is already plotting your demise. You attempt to observe the movements of the seasoned workers around you, but they operate with a frantic, almost supernatural speed and a grim precision, like automatons who have long ago made peace with their inevitable fate. They grasp, they pull, they crank, they feed, they push, they twist, a dizzying, intricate sequence that feels less like work and more like a macabre, ritualistic dance, perhaps performed as a dire warning to future generations. The foreman, naturally, stalks by again, his glare so intense it could curdle milk, clearly interpreting any pause or hesitation as a personal affront. Faster, he bellows, even though you haven't yet managed to identify which part of this metallic nightmare actually constitutes the work section. You desperately want to ask questions, but questions imply curiosity, and curiosity implies you're new. And if they know you're new, they might just assign you to an even more perilous station, perhaps feeding raw materials into the machine affectionately known as the hand collector. Every second you linger in this orientation feels like a palpable decrease in your life expectancy. Your pulse begins to throb in your ears, cold sweat slicks your palms, and your clothing suddenly feels like a dangerous entanglement. Your eyes dart wildly, convinced that a trap door is about to open beneath your feet. In this harrowing moment, standing before a monstrous Victorian machine with only raw anxiety and a morbid count of your remaining fingers as your guide, you grasp the true essence of your training. It's not try not to die, it's far more nuanced. It's try not to die asterisk, yet asterisk. So, now that you've miraculously survived orientation, a period that essentially consisted of someone shouting, "Don't lose a limb," over a relentless industrial scream, it's high time you were properly introduced to your new co-workers, the magnificent Victorian machines. These mechanical beasts are not merely large, they are colossal, steam-powered titans, engineered with all the tender empathy of a particularly heartless tax auditor during a famine. Modern machines, as you know, might offer a polite beep, perhaps a gentle guiding light, or even halt themselves automatically if you so much as sneeze too close. Victorian machines, however, operate on a vastly different, far more Darwinian philosophy, one that can be succinctly summarized thus: if it moves, crush it. If it doesn't move, crush it until it does. With a deep, almost involuntary inhale, you extend your hands towards the hulking mechanism before you. They tremble just a little, not from cold, but from something far more primal. Even before your fingers graze the cold metal, your eyes dart around, taking in the unofficial, much more effective warning signs etched into the very bodies of your fellow workers. There are no brightly painted placards here, no bold red letters screaming danger. Oh no, the Victorian era had its own grim shorthand. One man, just beside you, navigates his task with a telltale gap where a thumb once resided. Another clutches a tool with 2 fewer fingertips, his hand a strangely sculpted relic. And that veteran to your left, he seems to have shed a digit so long ago, its specific absence has blurred into a distant, half-forgotten memory. A chilling, silent testament, wouldn't you agree? These colossal machines, you quickly learn, are not powered by some quiet, invisible force. No, they are driven by a mesmerizing, terrifying dance of thick leather belts, whipping through the air at speeds that defy comprehension. One moment, you see a belt, a dark, tangible strap of hide. The next, it's a shimmering blur, a phantom menace capable of snatching your sleeve, your dignity, and indeed, your entire arm into its violent embrace in a single, terrifying instant. You try, truly, to keep your coarse, scratchy clothing tucked in tight. But Victorian fabric, bless its cotton soul, boasts no stretch, no forgiving flexibility. It has no interest in collaborating with you. If your shirt snags, even for a moment, it's not letting go. It's taking you with it. So you attempt to push the creeping dread aside, forcing yourself to focus, feeding the raw material into the hungry maw of the machine as you've been shown. The gears above you groan and grind with a metallic hunger. Pistons pump with a tireless, rhythmic thud, and every clank, every shuddering vibration feels less like industrial function and more like a personal threat. The entire contraption vibrates, shaking the very floor beneath your feet in a way that suggests its continued existence is less about engineering and more about sheer spite, held together by nothing but rust, desperate hope, and a healthy dose of a passive aggression, wouldn't you say? Occasionally, a voice, raw and strained, will cut through the din, shouting a warning. Watch your hands, or mind the gears. A kindly gesture, perhaps, but utterly useless, wouldn't you agree? As if you weren't already hyper-focused, wholly committed to the Herculean task of keeping every single precious part of yourself intact. But here's the cold, hard truth. These Victorian behemoths don't care about your commitment, not one bit. They seem to sense weakness, to sniff out the very scent of fear, and you, my friend, are currently producing fear at an industrial scale, churning it out like a faulty boiler spewing smoke. Then it happens. Your sleeve, without warning, brushes just a fraction too close to a rapidly spinning cog. Time itself seems to stretch, to warp, slowing to a glacial crawl. You watch, horrified, as your entire life flashes before your eyes, a dizzying montage that somehow includes memories you didn't even realize you possessed, like that time you burst into tears over a dropped sandwich. With a jolt, you rip your arm back, your heart hammering against your ribs, pulling it away just in the nick of time. A nearby coworker, grizzled and weary, offers a curt nod of approval, a silent acknowledgement that you've just passed a particularly dark, decidedly unwanted rite of passage. Later, you overhear someone whisper about a machine in the far corner, affectionately nicknamed the Nibbler. You do not ask why. By midday, the grim lesson has fully settled into your bones. You understand, with a chilling clarity, why Victorian factory workers never developed a sentimental attachment to their fingers. The machines, it seems, always wanted them more. Now, take a deep breath. Actually, no, don't. Not in a Victorian factory. The very air inside this echoing metal-clad cavern isn't really air at all. It's a hostile substance, a chaotic mixture, a potent cocktail. Perhaps a Victorian smoothie is a better description. Dust, thick and choking. Soot, fine and insidious. Steam, hissing and scalding. Oil vapor, clinging and pervasive. And beneath it all, the faint, undeniable aroma of everyone else's suffering. From the moment you crossed the threshold, your lungs, quite instinctively, filed a formal complaint. Each forced inhale feels less like drawing sustenance and more like accidentally swallowing a handful of coarse gravel. Each exhale, a desperate negotiation between your will to live and the poor decisions that led you here. Breathing, you realize, becomes a strategic, conscious choice. not a benign, automatic function. You glance around, and the atmosphere itself seems to possess a tangible texture. You can actually see the particles dancing, swirling in the scant light, filtering through the grime-coated windows. Are they cotton lint? If this were a textile mill, metal dust, perhaps, here amidst the heavy machinery. Or is it coal soot, thick and black, billowing from a steam engine that looks perpetually one spark away from a national disaster? These tiny specks pirouette and tumble through the polluted air, almost mockingly, as if reveling in their freedom at your absolute expense. Within minutes, your throat rasps, sandpaper dry, your eyes begin to water, stinging and blurring, and your lungs feel like a poorly maintained, wheezing accordion. Victorian workers, you understand, considered this sensation simply normal. A modern doctor, however, would likely be shouting at you to get out of there immediately. But no, your shift, you remember with a sinking feeling, has only just begun. The workers surrounding you are, without exception, coughing. Not polite little coughs, mind you, but deep, gut-wrenching convulsions that echo across the vast factory floor like the death rattles of dying bears. You hear deep, rattling wheezes that sound eerily similar to someone desperately trying to crank-start an ancient, stubbornly defunct lawnmower. Nobody bothers to cover their mouth. There's simply too much going on, too much clinging to consciousness to spare a hand. And if someone coughs up something solid, well, that's a private matter, strictly between them and the nearest priest, isn't it? It's a grim, shared reality. The factory floor itself radiates heat. Steam powers everything, after all. So the temperature hovers perpetually, somewhere between an uncomfortably hot sauna and a simmering pot of slow-boiling beef stew. You begin to sweat instantly, a steady trickle that would almost be a relief if the moisture didn't immediately combine with the omnipresent soot to form a wholly new element. Welcome to Victorian paste, a sticky, cloying black coating that adheres to every exposed inch of your skin, and, you'll soon discover, never quite washes off completely. Your lungs grow heavier with each passing moment. The deeper you venture into the factory's churning heart, the worse the air becomes, the more suffocating the atmosphere. By mid-morning, you find yourself instinctively trying to conserve oxygen, like some kind of Victorian monk practicing industrial meditation. You've involuntarily invented 3 entirely new coughing patterns, each more desperate than the last, and you're beginning to see strange, amorphous shapes swirling in the hazy, dust-laden air. Are they the machines? The foreman's looming silhouette? Or perhaps, you wonder, is it simply your very will to live, abandoning your body in a visible, spectral form, and there is no escape? The heavy, grimy windows are sealed shut, bolted tight, because opening them, you see, would let the outside air in, and fresh air, darling, is a luxury strictly reserved for people not currently sweating and choking on factory floors. By the time the midday whistle finally shrieks, a doctor wouldn't be needed to diagnose your plight. What you desperately need, you realize, with a jolt, is a time machine. This isn't air you're breathing. This is the Industrial Revolution's rather blunt, incredibly persistent way of telling you, quite emphatically, to go home. But if you thought the air was doing its best to shorten your lifespan, just wait until you experience the actual soundtrack of Victorian industrialism. The factory noise here isn't merely background ambience. It's a constant, unrelenting psychological assault. It doesn't simply echo within these cavernous walls. No, it actually occupies space inside your very skull, like some unwelcome tenant who's forgotten to pay rent. The precise moment you step onto the factory floor, the sheer wall of sound hits you with the force of a brick to the face. The machines roar, clank, grind, whir, hiss, and bang in such a chaotic, deafening symphony that even modern heavy metal bands would probably pause, exchange a look, and declare, "Okay, that's honestly a bit much." It's not just loud, it's aggressive, violent, the kind of noise that doesn't just fade into the background. Instead, it becomes the inescapable, pulsating background score to your deepest nightmares. Your ears, bless their delicate structure, immediately begin to protest. They try, quite desperately, to fold themselves shut. They consider resigning from their duties entirely. They even contemplate immigrating to a quieter, more peaceful corner of your head. But alas, Victorian factories possess no quiet parts, only louder parts, and then, inexplicably, far asterisk, louder parts. Communication, as you might imagine, is utterly impossible. If you want to impart even the simplest message to the person standing directly beside you, you must scream with the raw, gut-wrenching intensity of someone confessing a lifelong, deeply buried secret. Most of the time, they still won't hear you. The machines drown out every sound, every whisper, every plea, even managing to silence your own internal monologue, which, at this point, is probably screaming too. The relentless clamor is honestly a perverse blessing right now, because your own thoughts are a desperate, unheard scream. Instinctively, you'll try to shield your hearing, pressing hands over your ears, tilting your head in a futile gesture, even offering a silent prayer to any deity who might be listening. But nothing works, does it? The deafening din isn't merely assaulting your eardrums. It penetrates deep, resonating through your very bones, as if the factory itself is attempting some brutal, direct communication with your skeleton. Back then, genuine ear protection was a fantasy. Workers might stuff cotton into their ears, a makeshift solution that, ironically, often led to more hearing damage than it prevented. As the grueling hours stretch onward, a disturbing adaptation begins to take root in your mind. Your brain, desperate for order in the chaos, starts to perceive malicious patterns in the ceaseless clanging, like the machines are sending you threatening messages in some distorted Morse code. Listen closely to that one piston, the rhythmic asterisk, thump dash, clank dash, shriek asterisk, and if you let your mind wander just enough, it almost sounds like laughter. It's then that the chilling realization dawns. These monstrous contraptions aren't just loud, are they? They're actively mocking you, reveling in your torment. Your nerves fray like old rope, your shoulders hunch into a permanent defensive posture, and your very sanity feels like a thread slowly unspooling. Time loses all meaning, dissolving into an endless, agonizing present. Your thoughts blur into one continuous, desperate plea for just a moment of silence, a whisper of peace. But these machines, they remain utterly indifferent to your suffering, don't they? They are fueled by the insatiable hunger of steam, the dark heart of coal, and what feels suspiciously like pure, unadulterated spite. They will continue their screaming symphony of industry until your shift ends, or perhaps until the very end of civilization itself. Many Victorian workers went deaf slowly, a gradual erosion of a sense. You're going deaf immediately, not just physically, but emotionally too. By the end of this first hour, it's not just silence you crave. It's a simmering desire for revenge against the metallic beasts surrounding you. just when you're utterly convinced that this cacophony of gears and pistons is the single worst thing in this hellish factory, something far more demoralizing drifts into your peripheral vision. The supervisor. Ah, yes, the supervisor. You see, these men weren't chosen for their pleasant demeanor or any semblance of human warmth. Perish the thought. No, they were selected for specific industrial-era virtues, a chronic, deep-seated unhappiness, an uncanny ability to glare through solid walls, and a voice capable of cutting through the ear-splitting industrial noise and the last vestiges of human hope simultaneously. He materializes out of the swirling steam and dust, a gaunt, underpaid ghost of the Victorian era. His posture is stiff, almost unnaturally rigid, his expression perpetually bleak, and those eyebrows, they seem permanently etched into an "I'm profoundly disappointed in you" position. You don't even know his name yet, but somehow you already feel an inexplicable debt, as if you owe him several weeks' wages just for existing. His clothing is simple, almost understated: dust-coated trousers, a worn waistcoat, boots that have clearly stomped on more than their fair share of dreams. But it's not his attire that defines him, is it? It's the palpable aura of authority radiating stress, a suffocating blanket that settles over the entire floor. Watch the other workers, how they straighten their backs and quicken their movements the instant he passes by, their actions betraying a speed and panic usually reserved for escaping natural disasters. The foreman doesn't smile, he doesn't blink, he just judges every fiber of his being focused on finding fault. His version of encouragement: faster. His constructive feedback: you're doing it wrong. And empathy: we don't pay you to think. He approaches your station slowly, deliberately, like a predator who's frankly annoyed that he has to put in the effort to chase his meal. You try to look natural, a monumental task when surrounded by these infernal death machines, isn't it? Sweat trickles coldly down your spine, and your hands, despite your best efforts, tremble slightly. For a fleeting second, you consider making eye contact, then instantly recoil from the thought. That, you realize, with a jolt, is precisely how he detects fear. When he finally speaks, his voice a gravelly rasp cutting through the din, it's not a greeting. It's a stark warning, thinly veiled as a question. Is that the best you can do? For a moment, your soul quite literally detaches from your body, hovering somewhere near the grimy ceiling. He points a finger at your machine, shouting what he deems tips, which are decidedly not tips, like "don't jam it" and "keep it moving." You nod obediently, though you have absolutely no idea whose fault it is when the machine, with a mind of its own, suddenly decides it hates productivity and halts just for the fun of it. Around you, the seasoned workers operate with a chilling, robotic precision, each movement a practiced dance, all of them pretending they aren't utterly terrified. They've been here long enough to know that the supervisor senses weakness with the same primal instinct a shark senses blood in the water. And in those rare, unfortunate moments when someone falters, maybe they're injured, maybe their soul just took another brief vacation, the supervisor's voice slices through the factory's roar, sharp and cruel. Do you want to be replaced? The answer, deep down, is always yes, isn't it? But the meager paycheck screams a resounding no. It's in this harrowing moment that a chilling truth crystallizes. You could, perhaps, survive the bone-jarring noise, the omnipresent dust, even the brutal machinery. But the supervisor, he, you understand, is the true, inescapable villain of this entire industrial revolution. As a modern human, equipped with concepts like basic rights and, perhaps more importantly, hydration needs. You likely imagine a lunch break as a sacred window, a moment to rest, to regroup, to perhaps even rekindle that dwindling will to live. But here, in the heart of the Victorian factory, a lunch break is simply the designated period during which you continue working, albeit with the added challenge of chewing something vaguely, disturbingly edible. The bell finally clangs, announcing this hallowed interval of nourishment. And by hallowed, I mean approximately 8 frantic minutes, give or take how benevolent the supervisor feels that particular day. He, of course, never feels benevolent. The machines continue their relentless grind. You don't stop. Your ever-present existential dread certainly doesn't stop. The only thing that truly pauses is your fragile, flickering hope, your lunch. It's whatever unfortunate item you manage to wedge into your pocket without it liquefying into an unidentifiable goo. Perhaps yesterday's bread, now slightly fossilized into a formidable brick, or a cold, wrinkled potato, smelling faintly of desperation. And if you're truly fortunate, a small piece of cheese, a luxury that cost half a week's wages and smells like it could legally qualify as a weapon in a pinch. You extract your sad meal with trembling fingers, blow a fine layer of factory dust from its surface, and take a bite. Delicious. Hardly, but it contains calories, doesn't it? And in this place, that's more than enough. Victorian workers never sat down for meals, did they? Sitting implied rest, and rest in this dehumanizing environment. Implied humanity, a luxury you simply couldn't afford. Instead, everyone stands hunched over their machines, resembling a collection of weary goblins, trying to devour their meager provisions while simultaneously dodging moving parts that could effortlessly transform a meal break into a medical emergency. Should your bread, heaven forbid, tumble to the grimy floor, you face an immediate moral crisis. Do you pick it up? Do you leave it to its dusty fate? Do you simply surrender and cry? Do you accept this as a divine sign that lunch is officially over? Most, of course, pick it up, the modern 5-second rule. Here, it's more of a rapid 5-second glance to ensure no rats beat you to it. The noise, that relentless symphony of suffering, continues unabated, so deafening that you can't even hear the sounds of your own chewing, which, let's be honest, is probably for the best. Victorian food, after all, rarely made pleasing sounds. Your jaw aches, working overtime to try and break through bread that feels like it could double as a construction material. Meanwhile, a constant snowfall of fine industrial dust drifts gracefully into your food, adding a gritty, unappetizing crunch that no Michelin-starred chef could ever justify. Occasionally, amidst this grim tableau, someone might attempt to exchange a small, tired joke or a weary, almost imperceptible smile with a fellow worker, a tiny spark of human connection in the vast, cold machinery. The din of the factory at lunchtime is an oppressive blanket, muffling every sound, drowning out any hope of conversation. Even laughter, my friend, is forbidden not by explicit rule, but by the very environment itself. A metallic screech, the clatter of loose bolts, the constant worry of gears. If you manage a weak grin, it's likely a symptom of oxygen deprivation, not genuine amusement. Then, just as your stomach finally acknowledges the cold potato in your hand, a heavy shadow falls over you. The supervisor's footfalls thunder closer. His guttural roar, cutting through the noise, breaks over. Your soul collapses. 8 fleeting minutes have vanished. Your potato sits unfinished, a monument to a snatched moment of peace. Your jaw aches, your spirit wilts, and a vast, unforgiving expanse of 10 more hours stretches before you. Welcome, truly, to the Victorian lunch. As the afternoon crawls onward, your energy isn't merely low, it's entirely missing. Think of it as having packed a tiny suitcase, slipped out the back door of your consciousness, and relocated to another country. Your body now operates on raw instinct, a cold, persistent dread, and whatever microscopic nutrients clung to that solitary, cold potato you wolfed down. The unforgiving iron beasts around you do not care. The foreman, an unyielding pillar of indifference, certainly doesn't. Even time itself seems to be dragging its feet, relishing your torment, refusing to quicken its pace. Your shoulders scream from repetitive motions that haven't paused since the first glimmer of dawn. Your back feels like a tortured instrument, your legs a weak, incessant tremble. Your fingers, numb and unresponsive, offer a strange comfort, yet simultaneously whisper of the terrifying ease with which they could be lost. This, my friend, is what historians politely label the afternoon slump, a term you might simply call the final, desperate collapse. Your eyelids become a leaden weight, each blink a battle you're losing. You begin to sway slightly, not in any joyful rhythm, but in a slow, involuntary dance with unconsciousness as gravity negotiates your surrender. Each tick of the factory clock is a cruel joke, every hour an eternity, a personal attack on your dwindling will. Your brain, starved for any stimulation beyond clanking metal and the foreman's booming disapproval, desperately attempts escape. You picture yourself somewhere peaceful, a sun-drenched, grassy meadow, perhaps the gentle murmur of a quiet river, or simply being blissfully unconscious in any century but this one. Then, a sudden, icy shock. Your hand slips. You jolt awake, the sharp glint of steel reminding you that this hungry machine cares nothing for your pastoral fantasies. Glancing around, you see you are not alone in this profound exhaustion. Everyone else suffers the same collapse. Some workers move on autopilot, their eyes glazed over, hollow and spectral like overworked Victorian owls. Others are pale, drawn faces, almost translucent from hunger. A few look as though they're communicating with spirits, their minds having already checked out, but no one stops. They can't. The relentless pulse of the factory dictates your rhythm. The machine keeps churning, so you must keep moving, because stopping means introducing your living limbs to the merciless embrace of industrial-era engineering. A dizzying fog descends, and your mind starts asking strange, unanswerable questions. How long have I been here? What even is time? Is this shift ever going to end? You check the clock. Surely 3 hours have passed. You're wrong. It's been 7 minutes. Your stomach growls, a deep rumble. Your spine compresses, your very essence thinning, evaporating under the weight of it all. Still, the afternoon refuses to end. All you can do is keep working, keep breathing lightly, the air thick with soot and metallic temps, and hope the bell eventually shows mercy. But oh, my friend, that sweet chime is a distant dream, not for many, many hours. Deep into the afternoon's embrace, when exhaustion has stripped you bare and your muscles function through sheer bitter spite, a chilling truth dawns on you. Nobody reacts when someone gets hurt. Truly, absolutely nobody. A sharp cry pierces the drone of the machinery a few stations over. There's a sickening crunch, a blur of frantic motion, and suddenly a man is 1 digit fewer. A single finger, not enough for a break, not enough for sympathy, certainly not for paperwork, which barely exists beyond a bill you can't pay anyway. He secures the ragged remains with a grimy cloth, likely last washed during the Crimean War, mutters something definitely not polite, and simply keeps working. Your own hand instinctively tightens around your still attached fingers, a profound disbelief washing over you. Surely this warrants a pause. It does not. Victorian workers have a standard trio of reactions to catastrophic injury: a grunt, a mumbled insult directed at the unfeeling machine, and the immediate continuation of the shift. And you, earlier, nearly wept for a bruised toe, didn't you? Then, a woman's shriek cuts through the air nearby, a desperate sound as her hair gets caught in a gear. The machine snarls, chewing. The foreman yells, not out of concern for her agony, but for the brief halt in production. A quick snip, a rough cap pressed into her trembling hands, and she's back to the grind, as if nothing more than a minor inconvenience had occurred. You watch, an observer in a dark play, witnessing an alternate universe where human pain is merely an annoying scheduling conflict. Burns are even more common. Steam pipes shriek like angry geese, hissing their constant threat, and when they release pressure unexpectedly, they scorch everything within range: arms, faces, optimism. Workers respond with a guttural oath, a sharp shake of the arm, then return to feeding the machine. Because if you stop, it will absolutely find a way to punish you for your hesitation. Then there are the truly horrific moments. Occasionally, someone gets pulled into a machine more seriously. The line stops for a few minutes, not for aid or comfort. No one here is trained for that, but for the grim task of retrieval. During this ominous silence, workers use the temporary reprieve to stretch aching muscles, wipe grime from their brows, or take a quick, desperate bite of that unforgiving bread-rock hybrid from lunch. It's the closest thing anyone gets to a moment of peace. And your supervisor, his face is a mask of weary indifference, his emotional response ranging from irritated to bored. He's seen too many injuries to care, probably using them as informal teaching moments. Asterisk, that's what happens when you lose focus. Back to work, you lot. Asterisk, a cold dread settles deep in your bones as you realize the terrifying truth. These aren't mishaps, are they? They're simply occupational features. Victorian workers build resilience. You, my friend, build panic. And the shift continues. It feels like an eternity has passed, a lifetime of monotonous toil. Your limbs are lead, your mind a hazy fog of exhaustion, and your spirit, long departed, has probably already started a quieter life somewhere in rural France, sipping wine by now. But then a sound, sharp and piercing, yet impossibly beautiful. It cuts through the roaring machines, a jolt to your weary senses, the glorious, grating clang of the factory bell. For a brief, transcendent moment, a wave of pure, unadulterated euphoria washes over you. To your battered Victorian brain, that shrill, metallic sound is Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. Your entire body surges with relief. Your fingers, stiff and cramped, slowly unclench. Your stooped spine attempts to uncoil. You finally allow a small, private smile to flicker across your face, the first genuine one you can recall in what feels like an entire lifetime. The relentless clatter of the looms has quieted. The shift is truly over. You made it. You survived. You're free, right? You foolishly let the thought take root, already picturing the blissful oblivion of collapsing face first onto your straw mattress. But just as you turn, muscles aching with the promise of rest, a shadow falls over the doorway. It's your supervisor, a hulking silhouette against the dim factory interior, like a Victorian eclipse. He clears his throat, a low, guttural sound that instantly tells you your year is about to take a sharp, agonizing turn. Over time, he announces, not as a query, not as a suggestion, but as an undeniable decree. Your fragile smile shatters, crumbling from your face like ancient plaster from a condemned building. Over time, you instantly understand, isn't optional. It isn't even paid extra. It's simply the universe delivering a cruel punchline. Congratulations, you thought you were done. How quaint. In this relentless system, the rhythm of the machines dictates your very existence. If they run, you run. If they demand more output, your personal boundaries simply vanish. So the factory bell, which only moments ago had chimed with the sweet sound of liberation, now mocks you with the hollow clang of a cruel joke. Slowly, you shuffle back to your station, a defeated posture worthy of a medieval serf being led to the pillory. Every part of you screams in protest. Your knees feel like melting wax, threatening to give way with each painful step. Your wrists, strained from hours of repetitive motion, are now just molten candle wax, barely holding your hands together. Your shoulders, gone. They've retired, packed their bags, and become a mere footnote in the annals of history. Victorian workers like you rarely complained. The brutal economics of survival simply didn't allow for it. But inside your mind, a frantic negotiation begins. You whisper a desperate plea to the universe. If I survive this, I swear I will never, ever complain about Wi-Fi again. A bold, perhaps foolish, promise, considering your personal survival odds are currently plummeting faster than the quality of London air. The overtime stretches out, an endless, agonizing cycle of repetitive motion. Tick, 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 outside. The last vestiges of daylight bleed away, leaving the grimy windows to reflect only the factory's internal gloom. Not that they offered much of a view to begin with. Your internal clock, already unreliable, simply breaks. There is no longer a you beyond the rhythmic thrum of the dangerous machinery and the supervisor's periodic, booming commands that echo through the cavernous space. Finally, after what feels like an eternity hours of unpaid labor, utterly absent from any contract you might have imagined, the bell truly rings. This time, there are no celebratory cheers, no excited stirrings, just a quiet, collective shuffle as everyone, too numb to feel anything at all, simply walks out. As you drag yourself towards the exit, one thought crystallizes in your exhausted mind. If this is the best of all possible worlds, then surely some philosopher, perhaps a Mr. Linnaeus, needed to have a very serious chat with a Victorian factory worker. When your shift finally concludes, having extracted enough energy from you to make time itself feel weary, you stumble out into the evening air like a specter fresh from the grave, bewildered by the mechanics of haunting. You crave the invigorating rush of cool air, but this is Victorian England, so what you get is mostly a lungful of breathable coal dust. Still, it's a welcome escape from the choking confines of the factory. Your legs have transformed into a quivering mass of jelly. Not the smooth, elegant kind you might imagine, but more akin to the lumpy, suspicious sort Victorian children dreaded at Christmas. Each painful step sends tremors up your spine, and your feet throb inside shoes that have absorbed so much sewer water they could, at this point, legally qualify as a rather murky soup. The street is not merely dark. It's an oppressive, industrial dark. a deeper blackness born from smog and neglect. A thick, sooty fog rolls in, a sensory assault of burning coal, the cloying stench of rotting refuse, and the faint, rasping sound of someone coughing aggressively from 3 streets away. You instinctively draw a deep breath, a habit you instantly regret as your lungs threaten to stage an immediate strike. The walk home, in theory, should be a simple affair, but nothing in this era is ever simple. The cobblestones beneath your sodden shoes are treacherous, slippery, with damp, uneven, and seeming to actively rearrange themselves solely to trip you. You instinctively pull your thin coat tighter around you, though it offers warmth only in the most optimistic, emotional sense. Children, yes, children older than 8 or 9, trudge along beside you, their small, slumped figures a testament to their own finished shifts. Their tiny hands, gnarled and raw, still clutch tools that seem disproportionately larger than their fledgling hopes. A 6-year-old, astonishingly, passes you by, somehow looking fresher than you feel, and a sharp pang of shame pierces through your exhaustion. He's undoubtedly headed home to help with chores after his own 14-hour day, while you're barely managing to remain upright. Rats, bold and unbothered, scurry across your path. One pauses, looks you dead in the eye, and you swear you feel its judgment, a tiny, beady-eyed appraisal. You wouldn't be surprised if it had a more productive day than you, and it certainly looks cleaner. You stumble past the grim landscape of polluted rivers, their dark surfaces gleaming with refuse, past dilapidated wooden fences that have long given up the ghost, and the overcrowded, monolithic tenements that loom like silent witnesses to urban decay. Here and there, a lone man yells at a chimney, engaged in some deeply personal, unintelligible argument. Your body aches everywhere, a symphony of pain. Your arms feel like limp, wet rope. Your throat burns with soot, and even your elbows, which you didn't even know possessed the capacity for independent suffering, throb with a dull, persistent ache. Halfway home, your mind begins to conjure fantasies, not of food, not of rest. Those are distant, long-term dreams. No, your deepest desire is simply to sit, just sit, on anything. A rickety stool, a discarded crate, the cold, damp curb, even a forgotten, rotting Victorian cabbage. Anything would do. But you cannot stop. You must keep moving, because if you falter, if you pause even for a moment, the insidious cold will set in. And the chill of this era is a merciless thing, the kind that whispers tempting invitations to a lifelong terminal nap. By the time your weary feet finally find your street, your soul has officially filed for bankruptcy. You feel as though you've aged decades. Your very shadow seems to slouch with exhaustion. And this, you remind yourself with a bitter swallow, is only day 1. Victorians endured this every single day. Tomorrow, you will want nothing more than to remain in bed, to simply not get up. Unfortunately, that will not be an option. You finally make it home, or rather, you reach the building where you temporarily store your collapsing body between soul-crushing factory shifts. To call it a home would be generous to a fault. To label it structurally sound would be an act of wild optimism. To describe it as genuinely livable is nothing short of pure fiction. What you actually return to is a cramped, suffocating tenement room where every shred of privacy, every vestige of comfort, and even the basic luxury of breathable air have been ruthlessly stripped away in the name of efficiency. The instant you step inside, a complex, almost overwhelming aroma assaults your senses, a pungent, layered blend of damp clothing, the persistent chill of cold soot, the ever-present scent of boiled cabbage, and that faint, undeniable, almost viscous smell of too many human beings crammed into far too little space. If you could somehow bottle it, you'd undoubtedly have a new fragrance on your hands, perhaps aptly named Despair Number 5. Your room, if it can even be called that, is impossibly small. So small, in fact, that if you were to stretch out your arms, you might inadvertently find yourself becoming an honorary member of someone else's family next door. Your bed, a pathetic mound of straw, crunches ominously beneath your weight, like it's guarding generations of whispered, exhausted secrets. One half of it is permanently flattened, bearing the indelible imprint of countless weary workers who have collapsed onto it. The other half harbors an unsettling, unidentifiable lump. You desperately hope it's just more straw, but a creeping suspicion tells you it's likely something far more historical, something you don't want to examine too closely. You share this tiny space with several other individuals, siblings, parents, cousins, or, just as likely, complete strangers whose faces blur into the collective misery of communal living, who wandered in at some point, drawn by the desperate promise of a roof, and simply never left. Space, you see, was merely a suggestion here, not a tangible reality. Each person might claim a generous square foot of personal territory, a luxury by Victorian standards, offering slightly more room than you might find on the factory floor itself. Conversation, however, was a lost art, not because of the constant clamor, but because every soul present was too utterly drained to summon the energy for language. Instead, the room hummed with soft, weary groans, punctuated by the sharp crackle of a cough echoing in the dimness, and the almost musical scratching of a tenacious rat family, who seemed to believe they too were paying rent by their sheer refusal to depart. You stumbled towards the communal basin, its water a murky, forgotten brown, looking as if it had long since retired from the thankless job of being clean. Still, you splashed the tepid liquid onto your face, a futile gesture of hope, a desperate plea for revival. But it was just water, cold and disappointing, leaving you feeling only wetter and more acutely aware of your weariness. Dinner, if you could call it that, was whatever meager scraps your coins could buy. A slice of stale bread, a thin, watery soup, or perhaps something boiled so long it had shed all memory of its original form and flavor. You ate mechanically, your gaze fixed on some middle distance, like a machine rebooting, slowly processing the day's endless grind. As the sun finally dipped below the horizon, painting the grimy windows in shades of bruised purple, a biting chill seeped into the room, clinging to everything. You huddled deeper under a thin, threadbare blanket, its insulating power roughly equivalent to that of a damp napkin. Around you, the symphony of the night began, a low rumble of snores, another hacking cough, a fragmented mutter from someone dreaming aloud about the foreman's angry glare. You lay there, staring up at the network of cracks sprawling across the ceiling. A map of forgotten lives, and a single, chilling thought drifted through your utterly exhausted mind. If this was home, what on earth was hell supposed to look like? And so, here you are, sprawled on your lumpy straw mattress, your spine negotiating surrender terms, your lungs a repository for enough factory dust to officially qualify as a new geological deposit. You've somehow navigated your first Victorian workday. Survived might be a strong word, of course, if we generously stretch the definition to include still technically breathing, yet spiritually deceased. Then yes, you made it. Now, it's time for the hard truth, isn't it? Could you truly survive as a Victorian factory worker? Let's take a moment for a brutal, honest review of your accomplishments. You were wrenched awake by a bell that sounded like it held a personal vendetta against your very existence. You navigated streets where every puddle seemed a swirling vortex of biological hazards. Your fingers danced with machines designed in an era when safety regulations were whispers of witchcraft. You inhaled air with the nutritional value of pure chimney soot, probably with a side of lead. Lunch was a terrifying game of avoiding hungry moving parts. Your supervisor's hobbies included glaring and the systematic dismantling of human dignity. You toiled through overtime you never agreed to, weren't paid for, and certainly didn't mentally endure. You trudged home through a landscape that looked like the Industrial Revolution was losing an argument with gravity. And finally, you attempted sleep in a room so impossibly crowded it might legally qualify as a jar of human sardines. And guess what? Tomorrow, you get to do it all again. Victorian factory workers weren't just tough, you see. They were utterly forged from suffering and stark necessity. Their bodies had no choice but to adapt to the relentless, ear-shattering noise, the omnipresent filth, the gnawing hunger, the ever-present danger, and the complete, utter absence of luxuries like a minimum wage, the concept of a weekend, or even basic human rights. They didn't simply thrive, they existed. They endured. Endurance was the only metric available to them, their sole measure of success. Modern humans, by rather stark comparison, can barely tolerate a slow Wi-Fi connection, the slight disappointment of lukewarm coffee, or the existential dread of a phone battery dipping below 20%. Can you even imagine trying to explain to a Victorian worker that people today complain when their office chairs don't have adequate lumbar support? They would likely stare at you, then slowly gaze at the chair, and then, ever so politely, inquire as to what support actually meant in such a context. Let's be brutally, beautifully honest. Your lungs, gone by noon. Your hearing, eaten by the roaring machines in less than an hour. Your fingers, the machines would want them more than you do. Trust me, your mental health, that would have evaporated somewhere around 3:17 p.m. Your very will to continue. It would have abandoned your body sometime between the announcement of involuntary overtime and your third violent coughing fit. No, you would not survive a single day as a Victorian factory worker. And that, my friend, is not an insult. It's simply a profound testament to how unbelievably grueling their lives were, and how utterly unimaginable that level of raw endurance is to us now. They didn't have a choice. You do, and you, dear listener, chose to experience this story from a warm room, perhaps on a comfortable device, likely while sitting on a chair that does, indeed, offer excellent lumbar support. Congratulations, you already live better than a Victorian factory worker on their absolute best day. But perhaps we've dwelled enough on such stark realities and the grinding struggle for survival. Let us journey now, not forward in time, but back to an earlier age, to a different kind of need for release, a desire to be unbound. Before the scandal that would shake Rome to its very core, before the Senate began to tremble with a primal fear, before the great city itself quivered at the distant, rhythmic sound of drums in the dark, the bacchanalia were gentle things. They began as whispered gatherings, held under the soft, fading light of twilight, nestled deep within ancient vineyards, where the air hung heavy with the sweet, intoxicating scent of crushed grapes and warm, damp earth. These early rites, you see, were born from the Greeks, passed quietly into Italy through the cult of Dionysus, a god later reshaped into the Roman Bacchus. And in those nascent years, the participants were almost exclusively women wives, widows, daughters-all, seeking what the rigid, unyielding Roman world simply refused to give them: permission to feel something truly wild, something untamed, deep within their souls. Imagine it with me for a moment. A secluded hillside, just beyond the city's watchful eye. Lanterns casting dancing shadows from niches carved delicately into the ancient stone. The soft, sibilant rustle of laurel leaves in the evening breeze. A sacred circle of women, dressed not in the heavy, formal fabrics of Roman society, but in loosened garments that allowed for movement, for breath, for a profound sense of escape. At the very heart of their circle stood a simple wooden altar, adorned with twisting ivy, ripe bunches of grapes, and a humble clay cup filled with the first sacred pour of the year's wine. There was no frenzy here yet, no ecstatic shrieking, no chaotic chorus of voices, only soft, melodic singing, the hypnotic rhythm of bare feet on the cool earth, and a shared, unspoken promise to honor Bacchus by daring to step, just for these precious hours, outside the stifling boundaries carved out by husbands, by fathers, and by the relentless march of Roman law. For these women, the wine was never merely wine. It was a key, a potent loosening of the social knots tied so tightly around them since the moment of their birth. The Bacchanalia were meant to be moments of profound relief, of joyous rebirth, of a sacred communion with a God who insisted that joy was not some sinful indulgence, but a divine necessity. And precisely because these rites were so private, held far from the prying eyes of the city, they became even more sacred, more potent. No men were permitted in these earliest phases. The secrecy, then, wasn't sinister. It was simply a shield, a necessary protection. But secrecy, as Rome would always prove, invariably breeds suspicion. These twilight rituals took root and flourished because they answered a fundamental human need that Rome so rarely acknowledged: the deep, undeniable desire to be truly unbound, to step away from the crushing weight of duty and discipline and into something softer, something far more yielding. You see, what they discovered there was something far stranger, yes, and undeniably more ancient than even the empire's grandest marble columns. As the dark, sweet wine began to flow, its rich scent mingling with the damp earth, and the ancient songs drew the women into their deeper, pulsing rhythms, something profound awakened within them. It wasn't merely revelry. It was a potent sense of union with Bacchus himself, not the drunken mischief-maker history often depicts, but a liberator, a subtle whisperer of forgotten truths. He reminded them that beneath Rome's polished facade, every human soul secretly yearned for the wild, untamed spaces. And from this hushed, almost secret genesis, a movement too powerful to halt began to stir. The magnetism of these gatherings was undeniable, wouldn't you agree? What started as a clandestine sanctuary, primarily for women, soon expanded into something thrillingly widespread. It became an open invitation, a silent call to anyone feeling the suffocating weight of Roman expectation pressing against their ribs. Soon, young men, their curiosity piqued by whispers of forbidden rites, slipped in. Enslaved people, desperate for even a fleeting taste of equality, found their way. Freed men, often scorned by patrician circles, joined. Even a few daring nobles, seeking thrills, ventured into the wild clearings. These weren't quiet twilight ceremonies any longer. They exploded into vibrant, thrumming nights where wine loosened stiff limbs, drums shattered restraint, and every social boundary Rome held sacred melted into the swirling mist. To truly grasp its allure, you mustn't just envision Rome as a city of gleaming marble, but rather as a suffocating pressure cooker. Public life imposed discipline. Family life demanded obedience, and formal religion. It insisted on rigid conformity. But the Bacchanalia, the Bacchanalia asked only for surrender. Its participants genuinely believed that Bacchus could communicate directly through ecstasy, through that trembling abandon born when wine and driving rhythm intertwined. Those who experienced it swore that the god wasn't merely prayed to, he was felt. Stepping into one of these rites meant entering a world where the divine presence pressed close, a sensation you could taste on your tongue with every swallow of wine. And oh, how those rituals intensified. Flickering torches were carried deeper into forest clearings, their smoky light dancing on ancient trees. Wild vines coiled around thick trunks, appearing like living, slithering serpents in the shifting gloom. Worshippers moved in spiraling patterns, their dance growing more unrestrained, limbs blurring as the night deepened. Some swore their souls briefly detached, soaring free to join Bacchus in a realm where mortal rules ceased to exist. Others recounted vivid visions, vines erupting from the earth, hooved creatures capering beside them, the god's own form slipping between torchlight and darkness. Woven through this wild tapestry was a dangerous, intoxicating idea. The Bacchanalia permitted participants to transcend their mundane selves. Slaves shed the weight of their chains. Women forgot their domestic duties. Men abandoned the expectations of Roman masculinity. In those nights, your identity wasn't defined by birth, wealth, or citizenship. You were simply human, in ecstatic communion with a god who celebrated the pleasures Rome pretended to despise. Naturally, such freedom didn't sit well with everyone. Can you imagine? Neighbors, stirring, reported hearing drumming long after midnight, a rhythmic pulse that defied the city's quiet hours. Strangers, peering, exchanged whispers about strange convulsions and unsettling cries they couldn't decipher. Rumors began to swirl, some innocuous, others lurid and terrifying. But what truly struck fear into Rome's traditionalists wasn't the debauchery. It was the burgeoning conviction that the Bacchanalia offered a liberation the mighty Roman state itself could never provide. And the more people tasted that intoxicating freedom, the more they returned. These rites ceased to be mere ceremonies. They transformed into escape, rebellion, revelation, a doorway into a world Rome didn't control, and therefore a world Rome would soon endeavor to dismantle. Now, to an outsider, a staunch Roman citizen perhaps, stumbling upon a Bacchanalia would have looked like nothing short of absolute madness, utter chaos, right? But here's the secret. Within these sacred rites, madness wasn't a flaw. It was a deliberate, profound language. It represented a conscious, almost ritualistic unraveling of the self, a shedding of inhibition meticulously designed to pull each worshipper deeper. It was meant to guide them past the superficial anxieties of Roman life, into the very tangible, unvarnished presence of Bacchus himself. This transformation began the moment you slipped on a mask. Imagine donning the wild faces of satyrs, their leering grins, or the thorny visages of ancient spirits, even the snarling countenances of untamed beasts. Some wore exaggerated human expressions, painted mouths stretched wide, eyes frozen in a vivid, frightening, ecstatic delight. That mask, whether painted terracotta or carved wood, offered profound liberation. Concealed, you could shed the oppressive identity Rome forced upon you, stepping into the untamed creature of the wilderness, a primal being ruled not by rigid logic, but by raw instinct. Then the music would guide your descent. Flutes, shrill and insistent, pierced the thick night air with restless melodies. Drums throbbed relentlessly, a visceral, booming pulse like a second, wilder heartbeat in your chest. And cymbals crashed in erratic, shattering bursts, designed to jolt your senses awake. This was no orderly Roman procession with measured steps. No, this was a raw, untamed soundscape, crafted to dissolve the boundary between your conscious self and your ancient spirit. As participants whispered, you didn't hear it. You entered it. The rhythm, a living force, would swallow your thoughts, replacing them with something primal, inescapable, that simply demanded movement. And so you moved, swept into dizzying spirals, making wild leaps, your limbs trembling. You'd collapse to earth, only to rise again, part of a living wave, each dancer feeding off the frenzy of the next. Wine, naturally, flowed in unrestrained torrents, but it was never merely a drink, it was a sacrament. Each cup raised two lips, parched, symbolized a step closer to communion with Bacchus, a loosening of the mind's grip, allowing the god to slip into its cracks. For Romans, true inspiration fura was divine possession. In the Bacchanalia, that possession became the purpose. Worshippers yearned for the moment when they no longer danced but were danced through when they didn't sing but were sung through . For those fleeting breaths, they ceased to be alone in their bodies. Something shared, something ancient, passed through them. And sometimes, you'd even find animals woven into the rites, living, breathing symbols of Bacchus's wild dominion. Perhaps a goat, its horns elegantly crowned with verdant ivy, would wander placidly through the ecstatic crowd. Or small, bewildered creatures, released momentarily into the surging frenzy, would scatter and dart, a fleeting glimpse of the untamed. The flickering torches, held aloft by trembling hands, cast colossal wild shadows onto the ancient trees, distorting their familiar shapes. The entire forest transformed into an otherworldly stage, bathed in shifting, unreliable light, where the very fabric of reality seemed to grow thin, almost translucent. As the rites surged towards their thunderous peak, the line between perception and imagination blurred almost completely. Some participants, swept up in the intoxicating delirium, swore they felt phantom claws gently raking their skin, or the fleeting brush of unseen hooves against their legs, or even imagined vines coiling softly around their limbs. Were these genuine visitations from the gods' wild entourage? Perhaps, or perhaps they were simply the mind's desperate, exhilarating attempt to construct meaning from an overwhelming, magnificent sensory overload, to give shape to the formless ecstasy, to Rome's stern, conservative eyes peering in. This was nothing short of unholy chaos, pure madness, right? But within the throbbing circle, it resonated like truth. The masks provided honesty, allowing vulnerability without consequence. The relentless music rewrote the boundaries of yourself. The consecrated wine, you see, opened a gate. And when all these elements converged, worshippers believed they touched not insanity, but profound liberation. A freedom so fundamental that Rome, with all its power, could neither bestow it nor truly reclaim it. And that, my friend, that primal freedom, absolutely terrified the powerful. As the Bacchanalia continued its expansion, so too did the shadowy tapestry of rumors. These rites were no longer dismissed as simple worship or emotional release. In Rome's agitated imagination, they transformed into a boiling cauldron of every forbidden desire imaginable. And, let's be fair, the delicate line between spiritual and physical ecstasy, often blurred, almost vanished during these uninhibited ceremonies. This, crucially, was no accident. Bacchus himself was a potent god of dualities, embodying creation and destruction, joy and madness, chastity and abandon. To truly worship him, then, was to navigate that thrilling, treacherous, liminal space between the sacred and good. Find yourself drawn into a circle where the usual Roman demands for proper conduct melted away like snow under the sun. Bodhis moved with a startling freedom, unrestrained by the decorum you'd been taught to uphold your entire life. Here, in the dim, shifting light, participants danced so close that hands brushed and breath mingled, limbs weaving together as if everyone shared a single pulsing heart.